Good evening. We are honored to have Gerald Miller here again this evening to speak with us. It's been very good. I wanted to make an announcement. Please, as you're being provoked to ask him questions, he's not given us a whole lot of time to ask him questions, so write them down. We will use those in the panel discussion on Thursday evening. Please get them to Tim or I so that we can give the panel members a little bit of time to think about that beforehand. Thank you. And Gerald.
Well, good evening and greetings again in the name of the Lord. It's good to be gathered again on this evening, and I will start with two things. First of all, I am planning to open up briefly for a few questions from what I've talked about the first two nights in just a moment, and at the end again. My technology was working just fine, but does not seem to like your technology. And so since we can't make them both happy at the same time, I'm not going to use PowerPoint, which disappoints me a little bit because of the pictures of the brain that I'd like to show you. But that's okay. It'll be okay. It really will be. So just want you to be aware of that. So we valiantly tried. Thanks, Cliff, for helping there. One of the things that I'm enjoying here is talking with just a number of you throughout this week. And I just came back from Jonathan's, and I about didn't get here in time. By the time you eat all that good food and you have extended conversations about many things, it's really challenging to get to church on time. So just have been so much enjoying my time here with you. Thank you so much to all of you. I'd like to do just a brief review. We were considering 8 areas that I'm encouraging parents to think about because of how it affects school. And I'm coming at this, I have 5 children. I'm coming at this from that vantage point, but I'm coming at it more from the vantage point of a principal and teacher. Now, I know there's many people who've taught longer and further down the path than me. They should be the ones speaking this evening. But I am coming up, I guess, on 25 years this year in the classroom. And there's a couple of things that I observe over time, and I've been trying to talk about that and say, here's things that I think actually count. So we begin with looking at the history of Christian education, looking at a biblical basis for it. We moved into, well, where does this nurturing thing start? Where does that paideia begin? You said eventually from conception to age 6 is mission critical. And then from 6 to 18, you're building on that foundation that's been there. And that part of my heart is I see these children that I so dearly love in the audience, and know your church has them. And it's beautiful. And it's a wonderful opportunity that all of us get one shot at. There's no do-overs. And that's also why I believe in the Christian school. Because I think the school and the church working together can build on that foundation that you as moms and dads have built in the first 6 years of life. One question that often comes to me, well, what if I caught on to this too late? Well, it's never too late to start. So I don't want us to go into that mode. Well, I missed my opportunity. That's not the right way to look at that. God's in the business of redeeming, and if you weren't aware of some of this kind of thing, or maybe how you've been parenting, that's fine, okay? Tomorrow's another day. But I think it is critical that we consider these things. And so we looked at prioritizing school, the importance of reading to your children, singing with your children. And I will admit to an unfair bias. I will. I love to sing. And so I hope that's okay. But my observation is that that's a significant part of our heritage that is treasured, that functions out of the scriptural mandate to sing and worship. And that when it's done as families and as schools and as churches, it brings us together. Music brings together in ways that few other things can. So singing Making your home a place of learning where the day in, day out is just talking about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And letting your children do things and even letting them make some mistakes. And let them dump the flour into the dough and let them run the items through the cashier self-checkout. There's things that children can do that you're teaching them things. So your home is a place of learning. Making sure they hear the Bible stories. Encouraging the outdoors. Where, a tricycle, a rope, and a wagon goes a long way for fun. It doesn't take much more than that sometimes. And then we talked about allowing your children to fail. In a moment, we'll end those 8 areas with creating a culture of service rather than happiness. And so, just wanted a refresher. So maybe, especially from last evening, I did wonder, are there questions that you have? Now, depending on what you ask me, I might want to punt that to Thursday night panel discussion. You leaders can wave your hands and say, we want to talk about that. Don't answer anything that has to do with that. Okay, well, that's totally fine with me. I thought I'd give you an opportunity to give some feedback or to ask some questions about what we talked about last night on education starting at 0.
Maybe one thing to expand on, you said last evening something about music or singing is increasingly the way to reach the world, like improving the confidence. You want to expand on that?
My observation is that music has become more powerful as culture has declined. And so the alternatives to current music, the alternatives, as in the non-conformed versions, really are powerful and compelling to those who are not used to that kind of music. You see, today, think about this congregationally, even among our evangelical friends. It's all, and I'm not opposed to this, but you're singing melody, you're singing the same phrases over and over and over and over, okay, as a rule. Maybe the piano is so loud you hardly need to have parts to make it sound good. And these are things you and I take for granted. But when you actually have people, especially families and church groups and Christmas caroling, these kinds of things, when they're producing 4 parts, it's a thing of beauty. And what I find interesting is that, indeed, the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania was moved by the singing of 7th and 8th graders singing music that you could sing in church. That was from the last time we were there. All 6 foot and some of him. It's interesting. So I think it ministers because of its purity and simplicity in a confusing world. And I think that's one of the opportunities we have as Mennonites and Amish. Step right into that gap. One of the things I really think is beautiful is that we're producing our own music. We have hymn writers, we have people writing songs, and we ought to be singing those. So I sing some of Anthony's music. It's beautiful music, and so that's a benefit. And I think it's really compelling to our culture. They ask questions then. How do you get your students to do that? Oh, I'll tell you. There's my opportunity. And I'm thinking beyond students, I'm thinking families. We have a lady, I'll tell you this little story. We have a lady, Guys Mills, our church goes Christmas caroling, and we do it by geography. So people live in this area, sing to these people, and there's about 5 houses you dare not miss. There are people that won't go away on a Sunday evening for the month of December to make sure they're home when we get there. We're frankly not that great. It's the truth. Just saying it. But we love to do it. We enjoy it, but really. And she's always saying, you guys have to produce a CD so I can listen to you all day long. Okay? Somehow it ministers. I think it's one of the opportunities we have. Good question. Others?
Talk more about the serves it?
Can I punt that? Tomorrow night I'm going to spend half the evening doing that. That is at some level sort of the hinge pin upon which my ideas about school really, really bend on. So I'll talk about that, and I hope some practical ways that can work.
Competitive sports in schools.
Okay, someone else have a question? And your question? All right, okay. All right, well, this is my opinion, and it's not the same thing as the Bible. Okay, so just want you to know that. I have opinions about that, and it's been formed several ways. One is I make it a practice to talk to principals who've been in schools longer than I have, and ask them things like, what do you wish you would have done differently? What would you have done differently if you could do it over again? What was the biggest mistake you ever made in your career? Those kinds of fun questions. And what was the best thing you did? Okay, so it's trying to learn. Between that has informed my ideas. And the second thing has formed my ideas is I think our heritage and who we are as a people. So I'm going to go really gently here, but I'm going to be straightforward with how I see it so it doesn't take very much time going around the bush. Okay, so where am I at? As long as I'm the leader of Faith Builders Christian School, there will not be competitive sports. Okay, here's why. I love sports. Basketball is actually the thing for me. I love basketball. And I don't mind softball, but I love a good game of basketball. I went to the public school the first 8 years of my life. Our principal was from our church, and so that kind of sanctified the experience. I'm not going to talk much about that, but it wasn't sanctified enough to make me say that public school is the right place for our children, right? Okay, so I'm a product of that. I played competitive sports, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. I hated track and field. I was slow and klutzy and whatever. I never was actually good at sports, by the way, in case that's of interest, but I loved it. And I still enjoy playing with students and whatever, prone to injuries, which I now have, as I age, but anyway, I still enjoy it. I was a pitcher of fast pitch softball. I know the thrill of striking out, of actually pitching a no-hitter in the championship game for our district. I was a starter, I was a guard, I was little, I didn't hit 5 foot until I was at the end of 8th grade. I was shorter than all the girls in my class. But I made up for it with some spirit, I think, and I actually started on the basketball team in 8th grade. I think I know that world pretty well. It did not ruin me. Part of the reason it wasn't as problematic for me probably then is because of this. At that point, this was quite some time ago. We're actually talking about the 80s here, folks. So some time ago, there was a different cultural setting for sports. I personally feel like the God of this world has become entertainment and specifically sports. And it is a place, if you want a book to read James K.A. Smith on this. And he talks about places of American worship. He talks about the mall, consumerism, and he talks about a number of things, but he talks about sports. And if you stop and think about what's going on in the sports world, and no, I'm not against all sports. Now, hear what I'm saying. I'm very concerned about the grip it has on Anabaptists, though. Here's why. Every professional sports team has habits and rituals and traditions that, looking on, if we weren't used to them, we would say that is foolish. Why are they doing that? Okay? It's true. In fact, anymore, there are scantily clad women doing somersaults on a wooden floor. Can you help me understand what that has to do with playing basketball? I don't either know, actually. You see, it's actually become a center of American worship. People will pay thousands of dollars a year to go to games. What drives our culture is a sports world, the heroes of sports. It's no longer Grandpa's not the hero, and Billy Graham, and Adoniram Judson, and Menno Simons. It's LeBron James. And what I find is that is a whole culture. The American life has lived for sports. It is the god of this world, one of the gods of this world. And there's a whole tradition around it. In fact, their traditions are more settled deeply into their psyche than the traditions you have at Pequea Amish Mennonite Church. If you step back far enough to look at it, that's how it works. So the cultural pressure in the sports world is significant. There are, and I know that in some areas it's perfectly acceptable to go to a Pittsburgh Pirates game, or well, maybe that's bad news for you here in the eastern part of the state, but you get the picture. Whatever your church says, that's fine. I have concerns about that. And what I realized is that what we idolize, what we pursue, what we hope for, we also absorb some of those values that come with it. It's not valueless. That's why there's tradition around so much of it. And so, as a young person growing up, I don't know that we need to feed that any more than what's being fed culturally to us. It's hard to know where to stop. And I'm not writing all of it off. Don't even hear me saying that. I think there's places to make distinctions. You could argue, well, anyway. Can I be really bold here and say, like, Super Bowl? I'm troubled that our people watch the Super Bowl whether or not there's church. Because it's a worship service for the American people. I really believe that. I'm not, and you might say, well, that's not me. I'm not that concerned about it. But if you're having church, there's a worship service too. It's an expression of our loves, because what we love, we go after. And feeding loves when we're in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade seems counterproductive to me. So, Doug, am I in pretty deep here? Okay. So, where I'm at then is that I feel like a vision for a Christian education needs to stay very focused. There's a lot of things you can do in a Christian school that are legitimate. There really are. For instance, you could teach, let's just take high school now. You could teach home ec, you could teach welding, you could teach framing or construction or woodworking or sewing, and there's 1,000 things you could do for electives, and they'd be legitimate. My question is, how does this actually work when you put sports into more than just something you do as a school? In our school, the staff men play. Junior 7 to 9 plays us, and 10 to 12 plays us. We do 3 games a year. But it's not intramural. It's within the school, and we're kind of getting old for this, is the truth. And we actually beat him last time. Felt pretty good about that. We get whooped up on it. It's a fun game, but it does not distract from what we're actually trying to do as a school. We have adequate school spirit, I've found, to not have to actually incorporate sports into the program, to create rah-rah. I don't know why I'm saying all this, actually, because I feel like I'm going to get in trouble. I understand even the differences that I know who plays who around here. I hear from alumni 20 years later. I know how important it is. I would say that's different from getting into league play. Okay? I'll make some distinctions. I still think, what does it do to culture? How does it shape us? How does it shift our thinking? What does it actually do? Does it do what we think it actually does for us? Or are we as parents wanting to live vicariously through our children so that we look good and it's fun and it's entertaining? I'm just asking questions now. I had a man from a more liberal setting than we would be here, significantly more. I asked, what's the biggest mistake you made? He said, sports program. I said, why? And it wasn't Lancaster County, so it's another state, so you don't have to worry about that. He said, why? I said, why? He said, because school became overwhelmed with talk about the next game instead of learning and growing and being curious. It was all about that, and then it became about the jocks, the athletes, and the people that were cool because they could play well. And then we had people on the sidelines that were sidelined because they couldn't play very well. And he said, I was constantly dealing with some of the relational stresses. And if you're one of those that isn't very athletic and never were, you'll understand kind of how you feel like you missed it. If you were one of those guys that was really good and were the stars of the show, you can't understand what I'm talking about. Okay? That's typically how it works. But there is a dynamic there that pits. I don't like the idea of competition between schools very much either. I'd rather find other ways to do it rather than sports. So your Bible quizzing that you do probably, in my mind, makes more sense than sports. Okay? That's also competition, so I'm trying to be fair to the argument here. Will it take a school? Does it have to overshadow a school? No, it doesn't. But it tends to work that way over a period of time. And in a culture that's ridden with this stuff, I wonder, what does it mean to have a certain set of values that we deeply hold, deeply care about? And is everything that we're doing in our schools taking us that particular direction? That's the power of the action. We're going to talk about that tomorrow night. What you love, you do. What you love, you have time for. And what you love more, you have more time for. So this principal said the other issue I have is that children are constantly complaining about having homework. But we have all these away games, and Saturdays are shot over and over, and we have these evening games, and can't have homework on those nights. And he said the schools become mostly about sports. That's what makes school fun. Unfortunately, learning is hard work. It's not always actually fun. It's enjoyable to work hard because you're built to work. Young folks never forget that you're built to work. That's how God made you. So the argument on the other side then is this: you learn a lot of things about character and sportsmanship. I agree with that. I don't think that you have to use sports to get there or use competitive sports to get there. Okay? I don't think you have to. You can, but you don't have to. One brother told me, he said, I tell you what, for those kids that aren't really great at athletics or at school work, maybe that learning disability, gives them a chance to shine, and it puts them on the right path to stay in our churches. I said, how many do you know that's true about? And he thought for quite a few minutes and said, I guess nobody. It never actually did that after all. I'm trying just to lay out a bit of a vision that I have for our schools, and I recognize by saying that there are deeply entrenched traditions in this community that if you tried to change that, I'll be in Guys Mills while you do that. I get it. I get it. And I want you to hear me not in the spirit of criticism either. I hope you're not feeling that from me. I'm laying out why we don't. Okay, so you want to push back on me, Doug? Go ahead. You asked for it, and I gave you it. Maybe someone else has a... And I'm happy to talk about this later, too. I feel a little put on the spot, given the rich heritage you have here. I understand, I think, all of that. In fact, I know exactly who my friends, I know who went to Weavertown, I know who went to Terry Hill, I know who went to Faith, and I know who went to Ephrata, and I know who went to... Because you hear that. So it does bring school spirit. It also brings some competition that I'm saying, I don't know if it's completely healthy, but I understand that it is. So I'm trying to be very careful and very magnanimous about this. And saying, here's what I would say. I think at the least, we need to be very thoughtful about the implications. I would call for that, unabashedly. Okay?
I think you've been very gracious in your argument.
Okay. Well, and if I'm not, I'm glad to take critique too. You asked for my opinion. That was my opinion, okay? So I can't find it anywhere in the Gospels either. So, but I am trying to think about how to live those out in school life. Okay? I think that's mission critical. What other questions? You don't want to ask me another hard question because it might take too long, right? Well, that's probably right. I'm going to keep going here. I'd like to have a little space, maybe, hopefully, at the end, if I can. So I'd like to move on. That was invigorating. Thanks for making me think. I haven't thought about that for a while, so thank you. If you ask me now in 2 days from now, I'll have a nice, polished response. Unfortunately, that I didn't have there. Okay, I'd like to move right into now creating a culture of service rather than happiness. And so I didn't bring the papers from last night. But I'd like to talk about this one because I think it expresses one of the values of our culture that is incredibly much a part of the air in which you breathe, and the water in which you swim, and in the food in which you eat. Well, maybe not quite that much. I'm telling you, the culture of happiness, do things so you're happy, is everywhere. And I think it's affected even my parenting, and I'm not even a millennial. I'm just on the other, I'm one of these guys that's confused. I'm in between somewhere in there. So, this is, I think, critical. If you want the one thing to take away from things you can do as families, it's this idea. So who doesn't want their child to be happy? I do. I don't like when my children are distressed or they're unhappy or think they're working too hard. And, well, that doesn't bother me a whole lot, actually, but I still don't really like it. We just push through it. They got to learn to work. That's what your moms say, right? Well, you have to keep doing the dishes till they're done, because that's how you do things. And so happiness, though, for the Christian is not the goal. Happiness is a byproduct of wise choices, not a goal to be pursued. Happiness is a byproduct of doing what is right and adding value to others. That's happiness. True satisfaction in life comes from generosity, commitment, respect for others. True satisfaction comes from serving others, not ourselves. Now, for the sake of time, I'm actually not going to talk about how culture has actually moved, but Tim Elmore writes about this in a few of his books. And I like some of Tim Elmore's writing. If you want an author to pick up and read some things on the current generation, I love his picture. He believes in millennials. I do too. He believes in millennials. He says they are the future. They have a few things to think about, but our generation created millennials, so we'd better suck it up, figure out what we're going to do to help make them successful. Now, that's my words, not his, but that's the tone you get, which I like. In other words, it's not trying to just critique everything that's wrong. That's not what he's doing. So I like his writings. But he talks about how past cultures in America and Europe and Asia were so different. And I'll skim that. It used to be we were led by principles, and beliefs determined leadership of parents. Parents used to base their leadership on the belief there was clearly a right and wrong behavior. Now think about that just a moment. There's a lot more gray that we experience than we used to, right? There's a lot more question about whether that's right or wrong today. Children routinely interacted with adults in every stage of life. Parents used to feel, this is in most countries of the world, used to feel like discipline was the first trait a child must learn. They built a desire in their children's teen years to become adults. So this shift in broader culture actually does affect me, and I'm going to say us. So as parents today, we want the approval of our young people. They represent what is cool and relevant. We as adults desperately want that too, I find. As parents, I'm speaking broadly in the culture, we have few or no guiding principles. Many of today's parents were raised when principled living was fading or old-fashioned, so we just make it up as we go. As parents, we feel a little bit messed up. Now listen to me here. We feel a little bit messed up ourselves, so we believe we have no moral authority to ask our children to do what's right and to put down a line. We feel like we have to say, do as I say, not as I do. The other thing that we've bought into maybe is that we want our children to be happy, and whenever we want children to be happy, we're always thinking short term, not long term. Long-term thinking knows there's unhappiness on the road to a good life. So, American people bought into happiness. We more and more believe that material wealth and career goals and better cars and bigger paychecks, the whole American dream, that will satisfy us. But even secular research says that's not true. It only brings temporary happiness. Lottery winners and people who have been paralyzed report similar levels of happiness 1 year after the life-changing event to the rest of the public. 1 year. Happiness is largely dependent on how we react to or perceive outside events. I'm going to tell you just a quick story. Hardly feel like I have time, but I know we have some young people, and I like to tell stories too. So, when Todd was in second grade, his class couldn't have a Valentine's Day party because they were behind in their schoolwork. So he just said, you can't do that. So Todd wanted to exchange Valentine's cards with his friends anyway. Now, Todd was an outcast, and he went to public school, and knew that Mom knew he wouldn't get any cards in return. No one would ever give him a card. So she was afraid, Mom was really afraid that he would be disappointed. So his mom told him, just prepare a few cards, just a few to your best friends. Who would that be? And just secretly wished that he just forget about it. Maybe he'll just forget about it. Oh, but Todd insisted on writing a card for every single student in that 30-student classroom. At the end of the day, Todd's mother watched him walk up the driveway from the bus stop. As he entered the door, he was talking to himself. Not one. Not one. Not one. He was whispering this. And she realized her worst fears had been realized. Todd had not gotten one card. So she asked him about his day and braced herself for how to comfort her little boy. So, how was your day? And Todd said, Mom, today was great. It was great. I didn't forget one classmate. I gave a card to every one of my friends. Happiness is a matter of perspective. Parents, teachers, boards fear that unhappy children are a poor reflection on them. So we shelter our children and reward them quickly and easily and repeatedly. And so young people begin believing they are amazing. Now, y'all are amazing, but in a certain kind of way. You also have the book of Romans that says y'all are fallen. And I'm fallen. So you're amazing, but you're an amazing fallen person, which means you're not perfect. And you don't actually need an attaboy every time you do something right. Now, you do need affirmation, and I believe in that. But I don't know that you need it every time. The problem is that children late in adolescence begin to figure out that they aren't as great as they thought they were. Too many are told they are excellent and wonderful without working hard, and praise begins to ring hollow in their minds. And the first real failure of many teenagers today is between the ages of 17 and 24. That's when they figure out, I don't have it. I don't have it. So, Tim Elmore writes in his book, Artificial Maturity, helping kids meet the challenge of becoming authentic adults. He writes that we must communicate two sets of messages to children during the first 20 years of their lives. And I put this on your handout yesterday. In the first 10 years, the childhood messages should be, you are loved. First 10, you are loved. You are unique. You have gifts. You are safe. And you are valuable. And from 11 to 20, the message is, life is difficult. You are not in control. You are not that important. You are going to die, and your life is not about you. Is that too much? Makes a lot of sense, though, doesn't it? Children need to feel safe and protected, and the foundation, yes, they are. They need discipline, but they need to know they are loved and valued as children. But as they get older, they need to also recognize they're fallen, they're broken, they're mortal. Life does not revolve around them. I, in our school, can tell you which families have become child-centered, where life revolves around the child. It shouldn't be that way. Children get selfish that way. Children don't need life to revolve around them. They need to come alongside other things that are happening. So how does this work? Let me give you a quick example. My children would probably say, there's a lot more, Dad. Go ahead and say them. So in my work, we have orientation many times in a year for summer term and for 2-year program. And my children are forever going to these orientations. They hear the same boring things. Years. And guess what their father does? Y'all coming along every time. Now, is that necessary? You know what? It's not that life revolves around Dad either. But that is what our family committed to. And you're a part of the family. We're all going to do it together. And your interest, just because you want to go frisbee golfing, does not actually, is not going to bump out that orientation. I know, I'm too hard on my children, right? Y'all feeling sorry for them? Go ahead and feel sorry for them. You do that. I'm sure they'd probably appreciate a little bit of that pity. But here's what I'm realizing, though, is they also love my work. If every time they didn't want to do something, and I just said, well, that's okay, guess what? They'd have no space in their little world for what our family committed to. Does that make sense? Child-centered. Be careful. We don't owe our children happiness. We owe them perspective. We prepare them to be disciplined adults who understand what real fulfillment looks like. We create an environment which children strive for the approval of their parents rather than parents seeking the approval of their children. really, it's easy to become selfish. That's one way that I think families can cultivate a culture of service. What are the things we can do for the neighbors? And when mom goes and brings food over and does this and does that, for other people, it starts to speak. And when the children are involved in that, they realize where real satisfaction comes from. It's not from doing my own thing all the time. So how can we help our children in creating not a culture of happiness, but one of service? I think children should have to practice the hard work of doing something over and over and over and over until you're really good at it. For my children, it's the piano. I love music, and so my children have to do piano. Can I quit piano? No. I mean, well, it's not quite that simple. We talk through it. But you know what? The answer really is no. You need to practice. Well, it's so hard. Yeah, that's because you're not really good at it yet. And the longer you practice, the better you'll get at it. The same thing can go for throwing horseshoes or the washerboard game. I don't care what it is. Practice. When children practice to get good at something, they are fulfilled. We don't just make it simple for them. You know, dads are probably a little stiffer on this. Moms like to change the rules of the board games so the children sometimes win, right? Any other moms in here like that? Oh, that's okay, you just kind of move things around, But dads have this innate sense that, nope, you don't get a break. Okay, there you go. There's an example. So we need to think about the hard work of practice, getting better at something. You are happier when you know how to practice. Secondly, the children should hear the word no. Should we practice that together? We won't. It's really simple. It's one syllable. No. And children need to hear a no. Not a, well, maybe, let me think about that. Will he throw a tantrum if I don't? Well, we're guided by principles and beliefs and truth. And there's time to say, no, sweetheart, no. We can give a rationale. See, some of us are reacting to parents that said no and didn't talk about it. Well, you all have more tools, parents, I think. And you all can say, for these 3 reasons even, no. But beyond that, I'm saying children need to learn to hear no, and it actually means no, and no discussion. That's okay occasionally. Okay? It's okay for a child to hear no. Children don't need another buddy. They have lots of those. They need dads and moms. I can tell you in school who hears the word no at home and who doesn't. Because I work a lot harder with the children. I have them in my office more, and I'm dealing with a lot more problems. And the children that haven't heard the word no, kindly and firmly, never malicious, never angry, no. Young people, it's for your good, actually. You'll be a lot happier if you learn how to respond to no. Thirdly, learn to wait. Children don't want to delay gratification. They want it now. Best things in life don't come instantly. It's a lot better to work hard to buy your first little old beater. It doesn't have to actually be a fancy vehicle. When you've saved for it. Or maybe you wanted the other extra options and you saved longer for it before you bought the vehicle. Learning to wait makes you happier, helps you be a better servant. And then simply learn to serve. The pursuit of happiness has become part of the American tradition, and I'm calling us away from that. And I'm saying there's a lot more to life than being happy. The Declaration of Independence actually it mentioned life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I'm going to argue that one of the reasons that service wasn't in that, with the right to life, liberty, happiness, that was appropriate because service was so embedded in the culture of that day. That was understood. You all helped each other. But when we're producing consumers more than contributors, we produce dissatisfied children who are too selfish to see the needs of those around them. And it starts with us mom and dads. I'm not laying any of the things I said tonight so far on the young people and our children. I'm laying it on us, me, my shoulders. Do I have the guts, the spine? When we try to raise children who are happy and can't fail, we raise up a generation that has an entitlement mentality. I deserve this. I need more. I don't have enough. You can't do this to me. What about all of my friends? No one else has to do this. Parents, in case we forgot, there's always somebody else that can't either. And, I talk about this. My children hear this, and they still use those lines on me. Did you know that? I say, well, what about so-and-so? Well, that's different. Oh, how about so-and-so? Well, yeah. Well, how about so-and-so? Well, yeah. After a while, it's like, how many? A few. You see, all of us are fallen, and we're looking for the excuse to do what we want to do. We're entitled to it after all. Parents, we can help here. Raise up a generation of servers, not ones who are entitled to everything. Nurturing children starts early. And I'm calling us to do that. And I know you will. I know you want to. And I'm encouraging that and saying that part of parenting is hard. I find it hard. And I don't have a lot of trouble saying what I think, actually. And like you well know now, I don't mind so much, well, this is the way I see it. I like to be kind, I like to be firm. But there's times I still feel like my spine is made of peanut butter and a string or something, not bone. Okay, like, ooh, yeah, well, what about? There's room to negotiate, there's room to make mistakes, but I'm telling you, if we can think about what are my little decisions in a day-to-day way in my parenting doing for my children? It will matter for their entire lives. They'll have a better school experience as well. We'll stop right there and take your 2 or 3 minute break here. Okay, I think we'll dive into the next session here of technology and children. And I'm going to try to keep this from being another discussion about technology. Really? Now we'll see if I can accomplish this. But I would like to talk about it because it has impacted schools so deeply. And so I would like to raise it tonight from that perspective. It is pretty clear that technology has been a huge benefit to us. Everything that happens, decisions that are made, always has unintended consequences. Technology has been a wonderful thing. The other night when my son got rear-ended, I got a call within 30 seconds saying, "Hey, Dad, we called 911. We're doing okay, but this is what happened." I mean, when I was growing up, hey, you know something, young people? I actually had to drive to see my girlfriend 14 hours away. Like, because there was nothing like FaceTime, actually, or WhatsApp video. And we didn't have email back then. I know, it makes me old. And, well, there's just lots of things that we didn't have. And we wrote letters. Can you believe that? I actually wrote letters, like handwritten letters, every Sunday afternoon. I know, hard to believe. That's what I did. You all can hardly imagine this world. And we had one cordless phone that was beginning where they weren't very good, so we had a 25-foot cord, which became a 30-foot cord, so it could go into my bedroom so I could talk to my girlfriend, right? The 25 really stretches if you really push on it. You can get it to go a lot further than they're supposed to go. I know this because I did it. So that's the era in which I grew up. So I'm grateful for technology today. I really am. But every benefit like that also comes, there are always unintended consequences. And this is what I think that we are dealing with here. I want to say again, the context for this, I'm not going to read it again, but just to say that we're talking about nurture again. How do you nurture children in a very advanced age? The paideia. How do you nurture children? Technology is not valueless. It is pervasive, but it's only as pervasive as we allow. And I want to say that technology is changing us. Violent video games. I had a student who I overheard say, well, it wasn't, someone asked, well, isn't that a violent game? Well, not really. It didn't show any blood. It just, when they got killed, they just disappeared. That's not violent? Really? What's our definitions, right? Okay. In other words, we're shifting our thinking here. Okay, folks? We are shifting our thinking. And by the way, just for whatever it's worth, if we are who we say we are as Anabaptists, and we say that we are non-resistant, I urge us to consider what we spend free time doing, including you young men and women. Okay? Is that actually non-resistant? What is that? And how does it change us? PG movies. We'd like to think that no one watches movies. That's not true anymore. In fact, Beachy young people included, and Mennonite young people, watch movies that are rated R. Okay. It's for art purposes or for whatever purposes. But there's a lot more going on, folks, because technology has brought a lot of things into us. We haven't been very discerning, I don't think. To make this difficult, it's harder for churches to really agree on how to deal with appropriate guidelines. A local pastor there, not from our church, another church, said, if I had my druthers, there'd be no cell phone until the age of 16, no social media until 18, you can just die now, and no data plan until they're 18. Talk and text. He said, I wish our church could agree on that. He said, I think we would, by the time they're 18, they'd be much more discerning about social media usage. That's kind of a gutsy thing to say, I thought. You see, all of us in our minds immediately are making ourselves as exceptions about why, well, we could probably do it this way instead of that way. I'm asking us to look pretty carefully at ourselves. Technology has made much more pervasive the issue of pornography. But that's not actually what I'm talking about tonight. That's a piece of this, but it's really not the only thing. So I'd like to ask you a question. How has technology changed you?
Spend less time reading.
Spend less time reading.
And when I do read, it takes more effort.
Why?
Easily distracted, I
Oh, we got some honesty going on around here.
Affects children's creativity.
Affects children's creativity. You've noticed that too. It does for my children.
think. Makes me a better businessman.
Mm-hmm.
Makes get more done in a day, but also have less free time.
It affects family time and even job site time. At break, my guys are all on their phone. They don't even talk to each other at break time anymore.
Takes away awkward silences. Everybody just pulls out their phones.
I think one of the first things we need to do here is just admit that we've been changed by it. Then we need to think about, well, how has it changed us? How is it changed us? How can we make so that it's a blessing and a gift and that it stays a tool, not a toy? I'm using toy in a large sense that could include addictive social media habits. There are so many benefits to technology. Well, I'm not even going to go into that. I think we know it. It really is truly amazing. But here's the thing. We are in an era of time which we don't actually know the disadvantages of our technology yet. Okay? Did any of you 25 and older grow up with a cell phone in your hand at the age of 10 or 11 or 12? How many had an iPad in their house 10 years ago? Okay, see, I don't know when that came out. It could have been 10 years ago, but was it very pervasive? No, probably not. I mean, I still remember when the cell phones came out with the big box. Okay, it was amazing. You see, we're actually in an experimental stage in which we don't actually know how this is going to play for us as a people. The children in this church will be the first raised in a wireless environment. Catch that? That should make us sit on our heels and think very carefully. We have digital natives all around me and digital immigrants back there. Do you know that? Digital natives, digital immigrants, and some of you are natives. But I see immigrants spread throughout here. Immigrants. You know what I mean here? You've immigrated into technology. You didn't actually grow up with it. You came into this country, as it were, and you learned how to use it, but you didn't grow up with it. These people are digital natives. They grew up with it. If Grandpa has a problem with his phone, he just gives it to the 10-year-old who can fix it in a heartbeat. No problem. That's because they're natives, and you're an immigrant. I think it's a helpful distinction, actually, when we think about this issue. The changes in technology are so rapid. They are literally outstripping the human brain's ability to adapt. Gary Small says, and I quote, "The current explosion of digital technology not only is changing the way we live and communicate, but is rapidly and profoundly altering our brains. Daily exposure to high technology, computers, smartphones, video games, search engines like Google stimulates brain cell alterations. Our brains are evolving right now at a speed like never before." And he doesn't mean evolving in the evolution kind of way. He means it's actually changing your brain. A college pastor says this, and I quote, I have this on your sheet. "I see young people losing the interpersonal skills it takes to function in relationships, in a family, and in the church. My concern is how this lack of communication will affect their marriages and the way they parent. The digitally dependent generation is not able to take in a lot of information and get deep. They aren't reading books, and it's changing their learning style. They have a high need for distraction, so my teaching style has to adapt. As Andy Stanley has said, I have to teach less for more. I believe that parents should not live in a cocoon. Don't disengage, but get involved in their child's digital life. I believe the most damaging effect of the digital world to be the parents' own dependence on digital media because it will become their child's dependence. Unquote. And I would like for the group, I mentioned this group of about 22, 3 to 33 or something in there. That group of people is actually doing pretty well with technology. I hear students of faith builders say, we'll ask questions. Well, how do you handle technology? What do you do at the supper table? We're hearing more and more. Oh, we all have our phones away, but Dad keeps his beside the plate. When the phone rings, he answers it. I said, well, how do you feel about that? He says, not good. Okay, so for those of us immigrants, we need to think about this. Okay. The digital world seems to be breaking down a sense of unity as families. Do you even realize that recent research confirms that sleep deprivation in children can cause a pseudo form of ADD? It looks like ADD, but it isn't ADD. It's often the result of social media and connectedness through the night. A lot of children are staying up late because they're on their phones late at night. That's true. Not just in the secular world, it's also true among Anabaptists. I can give you stories. It's becoming difficult for schools to know what learning disabilities are intrinsic, a part of the child, and what is environmental. Is it more about the family life? In 2017, there were 2.1 billion smartphone users, and by last year, that number was 2.5 billion users. That's explosive growth. 2011, Barna research showed that many of us are spending as much as 8 hours per day in the digital world. Barna found, in their research, they found this. They found that parents were just as dependent on technology as their teens. Found that most family members feel that technology has been a positive influence, and they welcome technology and media with open arms. They also found that very few youth or adults take substantial breaks from technology. Only 10% of parents and 6% of teens say they try to take 1 day a week off from digital usage. Are families in control of technology, or are they being controlled by it? The medical field has research that says that the symptoms of being addicted to technology can include, get this, compulsive checking of messages, frequent changing of Facebook status and uploading of selfies, could add Instagram there, whatever, social withdrawal, loss of interest in activities that don't involve a computer, phone, or a gadget, feelings of restlessness when unable to go online. That would not apply to any of us here now, would it? You ever been in a place where you can't get any data? You know, you're somewhere in the back. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. We are more socially connected than ever before, but more disconnected than ever. Nancy Collier, in her book, The Power of Off, wrote this: it's connections to other human beings, real-life connections, not digital ones, that nourish us and make us feel like we count. Our presence, our full attention is the most important thing we can give each other. Digital communications don't result in deeper connections. So, our brains are literally changing. A baby's brain contains 100 billion neurons. That's amazing. 100 billion neurons, or brain cells. That's equivalent to the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. It produces these neurons before birth and then continues after birth to grow connections between them. During the first years of life, the brain continues to undergo a series of changes. With very little help, a child miraculously learns a language. By the time a child has reached the teen years, there are more neurons in the brain than needed. Can you believe that? My age, I That's scary. I'd like everything back I lost. By the time they get to be a teenager, the brain starts a pruning process to eliminate connections that are seldom or never used. That's the way God made your brain. Gary Small, a researcher, says the neural circuits that control the more traditional learning methods are neglected and gradually diminished. The pathways for human interaction and communication weaken as customary one-on-one people skills atrophy or go away. In other words, if we are spending time on our phone instead of connecting with people, the parts of our brain that get exercised by relating one-on-one to each other actually diminishes, and your capacity to relate well actually is physically going away. The medical field is very clear here. So let's talk about the pleasure center of the brain. Now this is where I wish I had my PowerPoint, but it'll be all right. The pleasure center of your brain is the nucleus accumbens. And it's the part of the brain that controls every experience of pleasure. A good meal, a great book, holding the hand of your wife, a pleasant social interaction, checking off a checklist after you got the job done. Those are all come out of your nucleus accumbens. This part of the brain awards certain behaviors which are good, so you'll repeat them. But if the pleasure system is overused, the experience of pleasure is overused, the experience of pleasure is diminished. You are then driven to a higher level of simulation. Put simply, overloading the pleasure system gradually raises the bar so that you have to increase the level of stimulation to maintain the pleasure. It's the basic cause of every addiction. Dopamine, now, okay, we have neurons, right? Dopamine is the neurotransmitter. It's the chemical messenger in your brain that carries the signal to the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center, from different parts of the brain. As you go for more and more pleasure, you push the dopamine level higher and higher. It's called dopamine flooding. Gambling, nicotine, alcohol addictions all begin here. The same thing that causes a casual drink to turn into alcoholism is biologically exactly the same as most internet behaviors such as Facebooking, Instagramming, or gaming. Did I go too fast there? Did that make sense? That's I'm talking physically. I'm not talking about it's a good idea to have an Instagram account or Facebook. I'm not talking about that here, folks. I'm talking about what's going on inside your head, physically. That little ding or vibrate or whatever on your phone that interacts with your pleasure center in your brain is exactly the same way gambling, nicotine, and alcohol interact. When you get a message, a notification, that notification does for you what, in a small way, exactly what nicotine, alcohol will do to us. When I hear of YouTubing through the night, all the alarm bells go off. When I hear the students messaging during the night, all my alarm bells go off. Almost a guarantee there's dopamine flooding going on. So the science behind this. So the human brain contains 4 major dopamine pathways, or connections between different parts of the brain that act as highways for these chemicals to go around. So every pathway has its own associated thinking and moving process. So you have all these pathways. There's a mesocortical and a mesolimbic, and I'm going to leave that out now. There's parts of your brain, and there's these highways going to these parts of your brain that are considered reward pathways and are almost always dysfunctional in cases of addiction. They're responsible for the release of dopamine in various parts of the brain, which shapes the activities of those areas. Now, while the reward pathways are distinct in how they work in your brain, all 3 become active when anticipating or experiencing something that's really rewarding or great. So this process, these highways start to work better and better, and it takes more and more. Although not as intense as a hit of cocaine, positive social stimuli has medically been found to similarly result in a release of dopamine, reinforcing whatever behavior happened before that. They have shown, neuroscientists have shown that rewarding social stimuli, such as laughing faces, positive recognition by our peers, messages from loved ones, activate the same dopamine pathways. Smartphones have provided us with an almost unlimited supply of stimuli, both positive and negative. So every time you get a little message, frankly, your brain says, ooh, cool. And it has a little push of dopamine. Now, unfortunately, this is the reason for the increase in depression, okay? Or anhedonia, which is the loss of ability to enjoy ordinary pleasure. Our lives, you see, what happens is when you can't get what you want, you get depressed. Our lives are being changed very quietly. And I only have 2 minutes here. So what's going on here is that physically we are actually changing. In the formative years of a child's life, it is changing our children. It really is. And tomorrow night, I guess I'll have to punt on that one too. I'm just going to offer several ideas. Bring your sheets back. Just several ideas. I just want to talk very briefly. Just here's some things to really think about. Folks, the dopamine push is real. And so it's not just about self-discipline. You can't walk up to an alcoholic and tell them, well, you just should make better choices. You should just decide. There's a reason they have programs for alcoholism. And they put groups around them and help them because they have trained their brains a certain way. And to get the same level of dopamine, they have to have more, and they know it. It's no different from some of our uses of technology. And I'm asking us to consider the implications when we have young people and older people not using all the pathways of the brain, but not actually using relational connections, which is often what happens. We actually lose the capacity for relationship physically because we're not exercising those parts. From 0 to 20, I beg you, think about what should happen there. I'll give you one thing to think about. Rule of thumb, I see a little baby back there. What a cutie. 0 to 2, they don't need to see a screen. They don't need it. 0 to 2, it's incredibly damaging, folks. Research is clear about 0 to 2. It's also becoming more clear that 3 and 4 is very damaging as well. And today, I was in church and I saw a dad give a smartphone to the child to play with because they were getting, bored. 3 years old. Folks, breaks my heart. And we're trying to teach those children in school. We just need to be aware of even the physical issues. We need to stop there. We'll pick this up with a few things tomorrow evening before we end on a servant education. God bless you.